All right, so we're being recorded here. Good morning, good evening, good night, whatever it works for you. It's morning and the sun is shining here in Philadelphia, so it's all nice and bright. But welcome to our Ethnography and Ethnomethodology Zoom conference. I'm delighted that we're here, joined by Dr. Kirti Mishra, who's an assistant professor OBHR at IIM-Udaipur, my favorite city in India. Her area of specialty and expertise have been in ethnography, and what she will do for us is to take a segment and walk us through a case study, apparently which she did in Australia. Is that correct, Kirti? Australia, right? So
Yes.
It'll be very exciting to hear firsthand her accounts as an ethnographer and what are the challenges, opportunities, pitfalls, etc., that she ran into. So we're going to be doing that. We're also joined here by a young lady by the name of Avantika Thureja, who some of you already know. And she is going to help us moderate and keep us all honest here, okay? Avantika is also a project coordinator for us for one of the cross-generational studies that we'll be launching. And my area of specialty, just a disclaimer, is not ethnography or ethnomethodology, even though these two are approaches that we use in qualitative research. My specialty, my area of specialty and expertise is in phenomenology, grounded theory, and IPA, interpretative phenomenological analysis. And I've done a lot of work with this. As a matter of fact, I have a whole YouTube channel where I provided public resources to everybody. So one of the reasons I wanted to offer this Zoom conference, A, is to learn, and also B, is to have somebody else come and teach us a little bit about that. So feel free to ask questions. But if you could just wait for the segments when we ask you to, ask, we'll be happy to field your questions at that time, as opposed to jumping in all the time, which I'm sure none of you is going to do. But we want to have a clean recording, and we want to be able to make sure that everybody takes away something of value from this. And just to emphasize here, the focus here is not to teach you anything. Okay? Believe it or not. You might think that is a weird statement. We're not here to teach anything. We're here to actually learn with you. So in that spirit, what I wanted to do was open the floor to you. And if you would just raise your hand and say what you understand when you hear the expression ethnography. What comes to mind when you hear the expression ethnography? Anybody?
So my name is Jayati. I
Okay.
come from a psychological background.
Okay.
So this might not be the perfect answer, but when I was reading my, research methods, that's when ethnography came in place, and we read it under observation. So it's like when you, study behavior of people in their own original settings. So an example of this kind of observation was when a researcher, went into the field dressed up as a gorilla to understand gorillas' behavior. So that's what my understanding of ethnography comes from.
Great. That's awesome. That is so, I mean, you just, in a couple of words, you painted such a beautiful picture about ethnography in my mind. That is awesome, Jyoti. That's wonderful. What do you think, Kirti? Wasn't that awesome, the way she described it?
Yeah, perfect. And perfect example also. I think, if you're referring to Jane Goodall's work, when I had to understand ethnography, that's where I went. You want to learn the behavior, you want to observe and explain why things are happening. And as you said, that you go into the field. So that idea of, observing people where they are, a more naturalistic inquiry. And again, I think a perfect example. And if people here haven't heard of Jane Goodall and her work, I would really suggest that, that's a fantastic example, right? So she's obviously looking at gorillas, but understanding their behavior. And very, very, one of the other things that you pointed out was the involvement of the researcher, right? You are going there, you're very immersed. And I think that is a key here when we talk about ethnography, the fact that the researcher is immersed in the field, you're there observing.
Nice. That's excellent. Who else has something to add? And believe me, there's no imperfect answer or there's no bad answer. All answers are good. Okay. So don't hold yourself back.
Hello, sir. It's so nice to hear from you. You sound so humble. I mean, everyone does, even.
I don't know if I'm humble or not, but I sound that way.
Correct.
Which is good.
I recently went through, while doing a review for one of the journals, it was
Yes.
a research in which a PhD scholar was working alongside other PhD scholars. It was a group of 12 subjects, and it was an ethnographic research on how, I mean, to study the attrition rate of PhD candidates. So because the researcher was himself a PhD student and working along with other PhD students, they were trying to see why and what are the motivators for attrition or even being engaged till the end. So that was one of my exposures to this research methodology.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. Where are you located, Abhishek?
Sir, I'm staying in Kolkata.
Oh, you're in Kolkata. Okay. I
Yes.
see a guitar hanging at the back. Do you play the guitar?
Yeah, I do.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Right. That's excellent. So anybody else wants to take a stab at this? Believe me, don't
Hi,
be
Dr. Anil.
bashful. Go ahead. Who's this?
Yeah.
Ajit?
Good evening. This is Ajit Nair.
Hi,
It's a
Ajit.
pleasure.
How are you?
All well. Thank you for organizing this forum, and I think it's fantastic to see so many people here. I think all fairly learned on a Saturday evening. So clearly there is a common thread that you'd rather be learning on a Saturday evening than doing other things.
Very good.
So which is fantastic. So I've been a market researcher for a fair bit, and then of course transitioned over to organizational culture, etc. And the most common use of ethnography, and I would say a limited so-called window of it, has really been around what we call as day in the life of studies. They're called DILOs. So most market researchers would use that acronym. So it is essentially to understand brand consumption and usage in the context of the home. So you literally go in and kind of be a fly on the wall, and you obviously use an appropriate researcher who fits in,
Right.
in the context of that particular home type or classification or socioeconomic class. And by literally spending a day or more, you try and understand how is that brand being consumed, and that's usually done to gather insights on consumption and then understand the consumer psyche and then look at what more can happen. So either a brand extension or a product innovation or a completely new need which might be latent and the consumer is not able to spell it out, say, in a focus group, but through ethnography you're able to kind of really get that through sheer so-called skill of observation, etc.
Beautiful. That was nice. And I'm so glad that you brought in this piece about user research, okay,
Right.
and how ethnography can become a part of user research. It's such an important area. And it's literally exploring. But what also made me chuckle was when you said fly on the wall, okay, because I was thinking of, does the fly on the wall become a detached observer, or does the fly on the wall actually get into the food and become a participant observer?
No, in fact, that's one of my questions coming into this session really is about, how do you ensure that you don't muddy the waters? And how do you, right?
See, this is
So,
why we have Dr. Kirti Mishra here with us
yeah,
from IIM-Udaipur.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Looking forward to that.
anybody else? That was awesome. Thank you so much. And what part of India are you located in?
I'm based in Mumbai and pretty much
Mumbai.
located within my four walls right now for obvious reasons. So that's really where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for sharing your piece with us. Anybody else?
Yes, Aishwarya Nayak did raise her hand.
Who has raised their hand?
Aishwarya Nayak.
Ishwarya. Okay. Go ahead, Ishwarya.
Hello, good evening. Actually, my question was along the same lines as mentioned before, like the role of the researcher as an absolute participant, being immersed and being one with the, people there and being objective per se, taking themselves apart from the setting. So, yeah, I wanted to know more about that. So it has been covered already.
That's great. No, well, you've also brought in this piece about the dialectical tension between observing and participating. Okay, and when you're observing, are you participating or not? And when you're actually participating, what part of you is actually observing? That's always it's a critical skill, not only in ethnography, but also in phenomenology. Okay, where a lot of us is a lot of the work that we are doing is actually co-creating knowledge. So even though we are involved, we are immersed in the co-creation of the knowledge, we are also observing as we go. So that's great. That's great. So Kirti, what do you have to say about what Aishwarya just said?
So a couple of great points there, if I might add, market research and focus groups. So that's really interesting, that, people ask why ethnography, right? Why can't I, like I said, what is it that, I'm not getting out of a focus group? Or what is it, that I'm trying to learn that an interview is not going to help me get? And I think that's where the power of observation comes in. We're trying to understand the unconscious actions. When you ask people, they might not tell you the whole story, because for very simple reason, they might think it's not important for you to know. When you talked about market research and products and how people use products, so it's only when we see them use that product, we understand, okay, there could be a different use, there could be an extension of a product. To just share with you an example. So I work mostly with organizations, so, organization and management. So the research site or the field for me is mostly organizations, going to meeting rooms, asking people, why do you do this or why do you say that? So one of the things that, I like to ask people is, how do you prepare for a meeting? Because I do research on routines. I try to understand, unpack the actions that people are involved in. And so preparing, going for a meeting or going for a presentation, it's a normal routine for a manager or for somebody who's working in an organization in your professional life. And when you ask them, right, they don't always tell us about some sort of idiosyncratic actions that they do. And one of those is actually how much, some people have these routines where, luck is important. Before I go for a really important meeting, I actually look at the photo of my child. Or, I just go and, pay my regards to my parents. Or I just rush into the temple and I, say a little prayer. And you ask people, right, in an interview, we ask them, we probe that what is it. And people will, they feel that it's not important, it's not part of me preparing for a meeting. Mostly people talk about, I go through my notes, I make sure that I'm dressed professionally. So this is this unconscious action that they are involving themselves in. It's actually a really important routine for us to understand. And this is where the power of ethnography comes into picture, that this is so important, things that we cannot always get from an interview. That's why we go and we observe people in their daily routines, naturalistic inquiry. And I think a key thing there was also, understanding that how much observation. So, you mentioned this really lovely metaphor which people use, being a fly on the wall. And this is where there is a spectrum. So you can be a fly on the wall wherein you're not involving yourself. So we are not immersed, right? Very passively sitting on the wall, just listening, just noticing what is happening, who comes into the meeting, where is everybody sitting in the meeting, do they call each other sir and ma'am, or everybody speaking first names, gives a bit about culture and things like that. So very passive, just observing, noting, and trying to understand. And you can have the extreme end, where I think somebody shared the example of the PhD student, where the researcher is also a PhD student. And this is the extreme case of immersion. And a lot of people who, in organizations, they tend to adopt this kind of a method where, they come up with a problem. They think that, there's something interesting to study, and they're a researcher and they are a participant as well. So that's very, very extreme level, so think of it as a spectrum, from being a fly on the wall where you're being very passive to you being completely integrated into the field. And I think somebody said objectivity. So, objectivity and reflexivity, I'm sure that as we go on, as we continue this conversation, we'll
Yes,
definitely be talking about reflexivity as we go along.
of course, that's my all-time favorite thing. And sometimes that is one of the most difficult things, because it can, one is always afraid that if I bring in my own feelings and own nuances into the research, does it really even have a place there? Okay. And in qualitative research, reflexivity is very, very critical. And of course, in phenomenology, you cannot be writing a phenomenology unless you bring in reflexivity at the very end and say, what did you assume? And if you were to do it all over again, how would your design unfold? And things of that nature. And you sort of, to a positivist mind, oh my goodness, what the heck are these talking about? Because the research is always removed from the research, right, in a manner of speaking. So this is great. And so if we look at this slide, I just wanted to also have Kirti talk to us a little bit about this, because I pulled out this from a very nice resource, Hammersley and Atkinson. I'd be happy to send this to you. They've done a phenomenal job of really unpacking ethnography in a way that people can really truly understand. So because of the meanings and interpretations and the different streams that are emerging in ethnography, there's an overlap. So people confuse with qualitative inquiry, field work, interpretative method, case study. They're thinking, oh, so if they're looking at case study method, they're saying, well, but I'm doing this case study method, so where does ethnography come into the picture? Or if I'm doing qualitative inquiry, so what am I really doing? So that is a challenge. And I've also talked to other researchers who have always feel that the waters are getting muddied when they think of ethnography. So Kirti, what would you like to say about that? About how can we in our minds sort this out and know what it is that we are really doing?
I think that we need to understand, right? Ethnography is also the two aspects to it. That's how I understand it, that it's a philosophical tradition, ethnography,
Nice.
and which I'm sure that, it's the same with the phenomenological
Yes, it
approach
is
as
very
well.
much true. Yeah.
So it's a philosophical paradigm in itself. And at the same time, it's also a method. And so let me try, you brought in the idea of case study. So for example, what I do, if I look at the macro structure, what I do is actually a case study. So I take an organization, which is a case of something. But in understanding the phenomena of interest, so I study sustainability and climate change responses. So in order to study that, in order to explain what is happening, right, I use ethnography to understand, to make sense of what is happening. And because it's ethnography, right? So what happens is my focus is on people, their actions. What is it that they are doing? How can I make sense of how this group behavior sort of, emerges at the organizational level? And then comes the idea of, the tools that you use. And this is where, when we talk about ethnography, in my conversations, a lot of people think that ethnography equals observations. That is not true. Ethnography is interviews, ethnography is conversations, it's observations as well. So ethnography, when we think of ethnography, the different tools that are available, and one of my favorite tools, and I think that it doesn't get the recognition that it should, is documents. And since I specifically work with organizations, I can tell you, things like minutes of meeting, company annual reports, emails that people send to each other. These are all, the different tools that we use in ethnography. So it's not just observations, right? And it's a very iterative process. You go for an observation, something strikes, right? You want to sort of delve into it even deeper. You go and have an interview later on, or you have a conversation later on, or you figure out, you've read something, something in a minutes of meeting where somebody came up with a drastic change and you want to know why this happened. So you identify those individuals and you go and talk to them. So I think let us understand that ethnography has all these tools. It's not just observation. It could be, like I said, it's documents, it's virtual ethnographies, it's emails that people are sending to each other. These days, especially because of Corona, we're all working online. The chat boxes. I mean, just imagine the data that's there right now.
Oh my God, it's an enormous data. That's,
right?
Yeah.
And this is all the tools that we use in ethnography. So this idea that I have to just observe. Observation is obviously key because we want to understand, like I said, it's important to understand the unconscious actions, right? And when we ask people, they don't always recall or they don't always know if it's important or not. For example, in my case, a lot of my participants, they would sort of bracket and tell me things because they would assume that this is not important for her to know. And it will happen, right? It will happen because they would think that, let me tell her this because I think this is really important for her. But that wasn't always the case, right? So I was because I work on routines, I'm actually interested in even, you might think something is not important, but it's important for my research. So that's where ethnography and observation are important. But let us understand that ethnography is not equal to observation. It's a whole set of methods that are available to us. So documents, interviews, conversations are there. And then let's think of these, I talked about this idea that there is a spectrum, whether you want to be just a fly on the wall and be reporting what is going on, right? It could be a very descriptive study where we're just reporting this is going on. So it's still, you're still very detached. You're observing, but from a distance. Or it could be very extreme immersion where you might actually be working for the organization. I have a lot of friends who have worked as consultants, and then they have used that consulting project as a research project as well, because they're heavily involved in what is happening in the organization. So just to summarize, I think we need to understand that ethnography is a paradigm. So you can have a case study, like I said, when I designed my project, design is still a case study because I'm looking at a particular organization. I'm studying one type of a phenomena or about organizational behavior. But in studying that, I'm drawing from ethnography to understand what is happening. So I'm using it to explain what is happening inside the organization.
Wow. And I just wanted to, if I may piggyback on what Dr. Kirti just said, I'd made a few notes before the Zoom session through this resource, Hammersley and Atkinson. And what they said, analysis of data involves interpretation of the meanings, functions, and consequences of human actions and institutional practices. All right. And so the product is the verbal descriptions, as you said, the minutes of the meeting, or it was even, my mind raced back to when I was in probably elementary school at DPS, and I'm thinking about all the water cooler conversations that used to happen. You huddled around the water cooler, everybody's trying to get to that, but before they can get to that, they're having, oh, this teacher said this or this teacher said that. All of that becomes data. Am I right, Kirti? Even that informal, what we would normally dismiss as inconsequential, is a part of the study. And to be able to really be mindful about that. But somebody had raised her hand, and I forget who it was. If you've raised your hand, can you just raise your hand again? Because I don't want to miss hearing from you. Somebody's hand. Avantika, somebody had raised their hand. Is anybody's hand up? Okay, I guess not. So two of the other things that I also jumped out at me as I was reading the text was this auto ethnography. and this virtual ethnography now, which is very, very, especially in the day and age we are in right now, with everything is going virtual. So if Kirti, you can just speak to both of these.
I would, start by saying, so I've actually had I can talk more about the autoethnography purely because I had a colleague who was involved in that. So very interesting study, and I think there are a couple of people from marketing, so they'll understand. So in supermarkets we have the checkout people. And this colleague of mine actually wanted to understand the routines of these checkout people, like how do you greet the customer, if you actually point them for some last minute buys and things like that. And so she actually worked at a supermarket as a checkout person to understand the phenomena in detail. So this was an autoethnography because she was talking about the routines of these checkout individuals, and she herself was a checkout person. So the idea that your auto is your own. So and I've come across some work done in gender studies as well, where people have used auto ethnographies. Now, virtual ethnography, as the name kind of suggests, it's uh, it's about it's studying the some people say cyber ethnography. It's basically online ethnography. So it's you're using online research methods. Unfortunately, haven't done it. Don't really know a lot of people who have done it. But like I said, it's something that has caught my attention, probably because of the COVID scenario, because there's a lot of online, I personally feel there's a lot of online data. Even things, I mentioned the chat boxes, but I think that even things like Twitter and Facebook forums, for example, there's a lot of data there. And if we're trying to study how people behave, I think that's going to be really useful. I really believe, I think I've already had a conversation with my own PhD student that we need to understand online ethnography, given the current scenario. So, but I do apologize that I haven't done it. So my understanding is very textbook oriented right now.
Yeah, the two absolutely amazing books. And I confess I've not really read them yet, but I bought them with the idea that I'm going to read it. One is Life Online. You're going to hear about Annette Markham's work. Very, very popular work. It's this one. All right. And the other one is Virtual Ethnography by Christine Hein. Okay. All right. So anybody that's interested in really delving deep into virtual ethnography would do well to read these two texts. I think they're just both wonderful pieces of writing. So so I just thought I'd just share that with you, because as someone who entered virtuality and the world of cyberspace back in the mid 90s, believe it or not. Oh, boy, it must be really, really old. Oh my God, mid 90s. So when the internet started to become available to the public, I immersed myself in the internet and did a lot of creative work in that. So the internet has always been a very, very fascinating space for me. It's so amorphous, so boundaryless, right? And yet, because of the disinhibition effect, which can work both, it's a double-edged sword. People will likely not say to each other what they would say on the internet, right? Because on the internet, you can say something to somebody which is pejorative, and then pull the plug because you don't have to be in that room anymore, right? But it's difficult to escape if you're in a physical space. So it's an awesome thing. I don't want to digress from that, but anybody wanting to do the virtual ethnography, it's a ripe field right now, because there's so much data that is available at your fingertips. And all of these platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook and all that, they archive your data, and actually you can ask for the archived data, bring it back in to study. So it's great. Let me just go to the next one. Just a little bit of the historical roots, the origins of ethnography. So it has its roots in 19th century Western anthropology. And I'm going to ask Kirti to talk to us about this a little bit, just to understand the history. We typically, a descriptive account of a culture or community outside the Western hemisphere. So when it really first started, it was called ethnology, okay? And ethnology was everything outside of one's own native place. So all these ethnographers, field workers, field researchers went outside. So it was, okay, so we are not concerned with what's happening inside our country, but we are more concerned with what's happening in Iraq, what's happening in India, what's happening in wherever, Timbuktu. So as the field emerged more and progressed and became more inclusive, the fieldwork started to encompass also what is happening within one's own native country, right? And what you're doing is you're going native. You'll hear the word expression going native. You're immersed, you're embedded within a small group or system. And what actually in my reading I realized was that even though you're doing a ethnography of a very large organization, you typically look at small segments of that company because you don't want to take on the whole thing unless you have a field of co-ethnographers who are also working with you within that organization, because there's so many different facets, so many different organizational systems that you're trying to explore. So because ethnography goes so deep into stuff, okay, it's important to be able to tackle it in bite-sized segments, all right? And I'm sure Kirti will talk to it about it. And also because of its complex history, ethnography does not have a standard definition or framework, okay? It's left to one's interpretation of how one is mobilizing that study. So Kirti, if you could just tell us a little bit about it from your own experiences.
So like I said, I work, like I said, mostly with organizations, and the study that I'm talking about is what I did for my PhD work. So very much interested in sustainability, and I wanted to understand how do organizations respond to climate change. And as we do in any kind of qualitative research, we're not after statistical generalizability, right? So we're not. So when we think of sampling, it has to be very purposive sampling. So I specifically therefore targeted the energy sector, because if we think of climate change, then burning coal is the key contributor to the warming of the planet. So I was very fortunate to get access to one of the largest energy companies in the country. And so that sort of, that means going native, so that became my research site. Something that's really important is, I think, when we're doing ethnographies, if you are talking about, going into a community, if you're talking about going into an organization, I think two things are very, very critical. One is the ethics of research. We have to be very careful, because with ethnography, as you would see, right, we are entering into people's lives, be it professional life when you are studying organizations, or when you're going and studying in communities. We're entering into their lives, and I think it's really important that we do this with a lot of ethics, making sure that our participants understand what is happening with the data, being always respectful. And I think being honest, truth is really important. A lot of my colleagues have, asked me this, that how was it that you were able to get absolute access to one of the largest, private sector company, that too, getting them to talk about climate change. It's a company which has the highest number of emissions, and it is, owns the largest coal mines in the country. And they have allowed you to enter into their organization and basically do whatever you want to. And I think that's where the honesty came in. Very clear, honest communication about what the research is, how does it impact the participants, and what is it that we are offering. For example, one of the things that happens in organization research is, at times participants could expect that, you're going to come in as a consultant and help them solve a problem. So I was very honest from day one, that's not my job. I'm not going to tell you how to respond to climate change. That's not what I'm doing this research for. So those two things really help me negotiate access. And I cannot, be more, I don't know how to sort of, talk about how important it is that we develop a very, very good relationship with our participants when we're talking about ethnography, because it's a long-term immersion. You don't just go in for a day. You don't. There will be, there will be so many, you will have so many reflective conversations with your participants. You'll sit and have lunch and dinner with them. So it's really important that, when going native, when you're going to be entering into somebody's life, professional life, personal life, it's really important that we develop a good relationship with these people. There have been times, when I was done with data collection and I was writing my thesis, and then, it would suddenly strike me, oh, I wish I had, talked a little bit more about this point. And because I had a good relationship with my participants, I could do that. I could immediately give them a call and say, you talked about this, and at that time I didn't think of this, but now I want some more information. Could I come and see you? One of the things that I did in terms of that, going native, I'm talking about, Western, an Australian public sector, private sector company. So mostly we're talking about white, Caucasian males, females, more men as well. I made it a point to always be dressed in formals, to an extent where, one of the secretaries did tell me that, Kirti, you don't have to. But I think that was very important. It gives you that respect. It shows that you're committed as a researcher. So always very nicely dressed up, always showing, before, like if I have an interview at 2, for example, or if I'm shadowing a meeting, which starts at 12, being there at 11:30, being, very smartly dressed up, understanding the language. Now, I was entering into the energy sector. Before this project, I had no understanding of the technicalities of the energy sector. I don't think I still do. But this is what, I actually ended up doing a course to understand how energy is traded in the market, purely because my participants were always talking about those terms. So for example, when you're interviewing somebody, right, and they're going to use jargons, because for them, it's not a jargon, it's their daily conversational language. But preparing beforehand really helps. It helps you get into conversations. It helps you understand your participants really, really well. And again, it comes back to that respect, right? I'm entering into your professional life. So I have made an effort to understand what is it that you do. I would stalk my participants. If I knew who I was going to speak with, or who are the people who will be at a meeting that I'm going to be following, I would understand everything about them, right? That what is their designation, how long have they been working in the organization, and all of that helped me in having those informal conversations where they would be like, and it's little things. So for example, I did my postgraduate in Australia as well. So there were a lot of people who had graduated from my university. So I would find that out and I would use that as an anchor. People like, you are also an alumni of my university. I went and studied there. Who did you have? And just like that, you start a conversation and you get such rich insights from your participants. So this may seem like it's little things, but I think that's where ethnography, the pre-preparation phase. When we say interviews, you can just have your interview guide, you can try out your interview guide with your peers, your friends, your colleagues. Ethnography, the pre-preparation is crucial. It's very important that we plan for it, because the more you are planned in your preparation stage, the better it's going to get towards the later parts of your work. It's going to help you, that immersion is going to be rich. You'll be able to extract and learn from your participants if you have spent some time in planning. Now, one of the studies that I'm currently working on right now is actually CSR, and this is based in India. It's based in Udaipur. And I have to go and spend time in communities. Now, so for this, there's a different planning. And again, it might seem quite trivial, but the thing is, I actually have to think about what is it that I'm going to wear? How am I going to talk to people? I cannot go and talk because I'm a woman. I cannot go directly talk to the men there. I need to have maybe a representative from the NGO who introduces me first. Right? I cannot use people's first name. I need to limit my use of, my mobile phone as well. It's not considered polite for that community. All of this is pre-planning, and it is so essential. So this idea of going native means that there is a lot of planning and effort that we have to put in. And the other thing that really it helps you with is because we want to get, like I said, ethnography is all about the unconscious actions, the unconscious behaviors. So your participants, right, they need to feel that there is no fly on the wall. You're one of us, right? You're one of us. I feel,
Right.
I trust you so much. You're not somebody out there, with your camera, with your phone recording.
Right.
You
That's
want
great.
those standards.
Excellent. So I think you've really unpacked for us the going native, because a lot of people get confused about this expression going native, and they throw it around as though it's just something footloose. It really, there is a way you go native, and going native requires a lot of prerequisites. There's a lot of negotiation that has to happen. There has been agreement, bilateral agreement. So I see that Siddhant had raised his hand, so I don't want to pass that over. So Siddhant, did you have a question for us?
Yes, so I had a question, particularly with the going native thing. So I have an experience of working with communities in Ghana and in African countries. And that's when I had not a very long immersion session, but I had an observing and a participation and an immersion session there. So two questions there. The first was I struggled a lot with dealing with the outsider treatment that you get there, because there it's even bigger, because there is a racial difference there. So even to offset that would take a really, really long time to really build rapport with those people. So how do you deal with the outsider treatment in such cases? And the other question was also connecting to the language issue that you talked to. There was a different spoken language altogether. So I had a translator with me, but then again, there are so many things that are missed out. So how do you offset the effects of translation in an ethnographic setting?
Right.
Yeah, so Siddhant is doing some wonderful work. As a matter of fact, he's one of your IIM. Siddhant, you were at IIM Bangalore, right? For a while?
Calcutta, yeah.
Calcutta, so he was at IIM Calcutta, believe it or not. After how many months did you leave the program?
8 months.
After 8 months at IMC, which people would die to get into, he leaves the program and goes to Stanford to study. Amazing, guys. I mean, hey, so you got it like at the back of the, hey, so what did I am Calcutta? It's a piece of cake, just do the exam and get in there. And Stanford, what the hell? I can get into Stanford, anybody. So amazing. Congratulations for doing that and for achieving all of that. And congratulations for all of that accomplishment. It's certainly not something to sneeze at. It's very challenging. So I appreciate you being here with us. One thing that I wanted to talk about, which actually has been jumping out at me, is something called foreshadowed problems. It's kind of like, although I'm certain it's not the same as bracketing in qualitative research, but foreshadowed problems is stuff that is at the back of your mind as you're getting into an ethnography. Okay. And so so this is to Kirti. So how do you remain exploratory in your mind, open, unstructured, and all that, while dealing with these foreshadowed problems? So how do you keep those aside, okay, in order to be totally open?
Absolutely. So this is where I think that there are a couple of things that I do. The first one is, as a PhD student, you will always have your supervisors. Please use them to have reflective conversations. Making sure that they're constantly asking you questions. Like I would, after every 3 or 4 days of my field work, I would come back and have these 2-3 hour long conversations for them to challenge me that is there anything that I have missed out. The second thing is using templates, and I'm a very traditional paper pencil person, and I like the templates have helped me so much. So whenever I do any sort of field work, or even simple interviews, I tend to use blank A4 sheets, and whenever I go for observations, first of all, it's all going to be very, very descriptive. Absolutely everything and anything that I see. Obviously, there's a little bit, creative imagination has to be there. So, things that are connected to my phenomena, very, very descriptive notes. And I divide that paper, right? So I have my A4 sheets. The second one is always, the second sort of the column that I have is always connections to existing framework, right? Because as somebody, I'm PhD students and academics would understand, right? We all have our theoretical baggages now. So I'm like, for example, I'll start thinking about routines, or I start thinking about processes, because that's something that I like to do. That's something I do. So automatically I'll start thinking, okay, maybe this is somewhere an institutionalization of routine is happening. So that's coming from my preconceived theoretical frameworks that I have. So I write them down. And the second one, so the third column is always something new. Absolutely, everything that was exciting. Maybe I have an inkling that this could be connected to gender. I'll write it down. It's not really my focus area, but I'll write it down. Okay, maybe there's something about culture which could be important, maybe something about racial discrimination and things like that. And I still write those themes down. And then I used to joke about this, but in all seriousness, when I used to go for my observations, I used to spend a lot of time sitting in the washroom. Reason being that after that, after 9 to 5, observing, being in the office, that immediate reflection is very, very critical. So as soon as everybody would be packing up to leave for home, I would be holed up in the washroom, frantically writing down the connections, right? That if I thought of gender, why did I think of gender there? Or if I thought about culture, why did I think about culture? If I had made a note about what somebody was wearing. In my case, because, there was a lot of meetings between stakeholders, so it's important to understand the power dynamics. Why is it that X only sits on this side of the table? Why did I make a point of this? What was I thinking? Maybe a paper I have read, or maybe a conversation that I had with the colleague. So I know it can be very overwhelming, but immediate reflection is very, very crucial. You don't have to do it for 3-4 hours together, but once that day is over, try to very quickly take a notebook, and these days, we have great technology, and like me, if you're not that old, you can just record your reflections, right? On your way back home, you're just recording your reflections. But make sure that you do it as soon as possible. Even with interviews, it is so critical that we go through that reflective exercise as soon as possible, because like Dr. Nalal said, something new, which is in our head, we might
Right.
not be able to recall that. And that
Right.
will only happen when we, these because like I was sharing in the beginning, uh, I've not been trained in ethnography, but it emerged as the best tool for me to answer my research problems for my thesis.
Yeah.
And day one, when I went into this organization, and I thought, I've got it, right? How difficult can this be? I have read everything, I've read Hammersley and Atkinson word by word. So how difficult could this
Correct.
be?
Right.
And I returned, and I'm kidding you not, I had a migraine. And I did not know.
Wow.
I had finished 3 notebooks, and I wasn't sure what will, and it's just day one. And I
Right.
immediately, called my supervisors, and we, then sat down and developed those templates.
Yeah.
You have some code names for people in the meeting, where the meetings are, what is it that you're observing, and things like that. Those templates are crucial. Make them for your own work, work with your colleagues and peers to make sure. So like I said, I think ethnography, the more you prepare before getting into the field, the better insights you're going to get.
Great. Excellent point. And Aishwarya Naik has
I'm
raised
so
her
sorry
hand.
to cut you off, Dr. Anil, but Javed has already asked a question 10 minutes ago in the chat
Okay.
box. So
Okay.
may I
And
just
you just,
repeat that question?
you're totally amazing, because Avantika, I was just going to say, are you keeping an eye on the chat box? Boy, I'll tell you, we are just totally in sync. Wonderful. So that's
Just
great.
repeat
So,
what
so
question he has
Javed,
asked.
let's give it to Javed first, and then we can have Ashwarya. And I believe Mr. Chandra has also raised his hand, right?
Yes, he
Correct?
raised his hand before.
Okay, he raised his hand
Right.
before. Okay, excellent.
So
So go ahead,
I'll
Javed.
just repeat. Actually, he has written his question in the chat box, so I'll just repeat that.
Okay.
Okay, so he asks how to handle ethical challenges to engaging, treating online conversational environments as compared to traditional fieldwork.
Did you catch that, Kirti?
Just wanting to understand, Javed, when you say ethical challenges, are you talking about things like anonymity or how we handle the data, like seeking permission? What do you mean by ethical challenges here? Have we lost Javed? He's not here.
Is he going to write back the answer or the question or?
I think till then you can answer Ishwarya's question.
Yes,
and we
Ashwarya, why
can
don't
wait
you go ahead?
for Javed's answer.
Take it away, Ashwarya. Go ahead.
Hello again. So my question was, as an ethnographer, you are immersing yourself in the setting itself amongst the people that you're studying to an extent that you're around them all the time. And and these are long-term commitments. So I'm just imagining after a point of time, it's bound to have an effect on how you see yourself as well. Because that's the kind of people you have around, that's the kind of culture you're in, and that's kind of norms that you're following. So how do you set lines in, understanding yourself and being aware and setting boundaries and how much you're going to change yourself to accommodate this research? And how do you go about looking at yourself and taking care of yourself as a researcher through this? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. If I may take the lead on that. How I wish there was an answer, a perfect answer to this. But such an important point you've raised, Ashwarya, that what happens to you as a researcher. And I don't think it's just about ethnography. With qualitative, because the researcher is so connected to, the problem they're studying or the phenomena they're studying, it does impact you more so in certain settings. For example, like I shared one of my recent works, working with community and CSR. And like I said, I'm not there working as a government agent that I can help the community. But of course, you're exposed to the challenges that the community is facing. I'm sure Siddharth would also agree here that, and sometimes, community members, they start having expectations of you. So it's really important that you're very clear from the very beginning that's not your role. It has been a bit challenging for me right now with that project, where I've had to be very clear that, listen, I'm not here from the government. I do understand that there are certain structural challenges because of which funding doesn't reach you, or your pakka house is not yet pakka, even though the government has given the funds. And I really, even though I come from Delhi, I actually cannot go to the PMO and tell them that take your application. So I have to be very clear. The NGO helps me a lot in this. So maybe just also connecting to what Siddhant had asked, that how do you, go into the community, how do you build connections with them, and how do you get to, sort of make them trust you. Village elders, community elders, going and spending time with them, finding topics that are common to you does help. So for example, in my case, people do look at me and go, you're a woman, and here you are talking about all these things. But the moment I start telling them that my family also has a rural background, and we also have farmlands, and I grew up visiting villages, and that's where my grandparents were, immediately you see that you can see the change on their faces, and you see the trust. Now, so it's really important, Aishwarya, that there is a bit of self-preservation and you don't get lost. You also need to have some self-discipline. There will be challenges, especially when you're going into communities. You will come across challenges, but is that why you are there? right? Are you there as an evaluator? Are you going to be, are you there as a problem solver? If that's the goal of your program, that's why you've undertaken an ethnography, then it's good. But speaking for myself, as an academic, even though I might say that I'm a bit of a critical scholar, I take, I'm okay with the fact that, my role in this is to bring those challenges to the forefront. But right now, I'm not really resolving them. Probably it's for somebody else to do that task. Uh, Making sure that those reflective conversations are very important, since, and as you said, ethnography, because of the immersion, um, please make sure that the field very well, you're taking care of yourself. Like I said, those like, for example, sometimes we just forget to even bring lunch with us. Now here's the thing, right? You can't really work on an empty stomach. So making sure that you're well rested. For example, if you know that you have an entire day of observing, make sure that you are rested properly. What I usually do is, before I won't go into the field, I just go through my template once, so that it's at my head. And I make sure that I'm energized, I've taken good rest, making sure that your basic needs are being taken care of. If possible, try and um, I know as a PhD student that option might not be there for you, but if you can work in groups, that also helps in taking the load away from you. A lot of ethnographers do work in groups, so that it's not just one person. And then lastly, like I said, the more time you spend in the field connecting with your participants, at least for me, I get a lot of energy from the participants just being there, just being grateful because they are allowing me to, to enter into their lives and to study them. So that kind of keeps me going. But I do get your point, and I wish there was, a strategy that we could follow, which would make it less overwhelming. And
Right.
let me be very straightforward. Ethnography field data can be very, very overwhelming. Um, but we have to manage, manage that sort of that comes with the field work.
Yeah, so thanks, Kirti. So Siddhant and Jayati also have
Raise their
questions. So
hands,
Siddhant, why
right?
don't you go first, right?
Siddhant has already asked his question.
Oh, you've already
Yes.
asked the question.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's Jayati's turn.
Okay, Jayati, go
Hi.
ahead.
Thank you. So I've been hearing Miss Kirti, talking about reflections and the entire process of reflexivity. So my question comes from a place like when you go as a researcher, you do assume a sense of positionality. You have a particular position of how you do research. So when you do research, how do you end up differentiating between being reflexive, being reflective, and being introspective? Like, is there a line that you draw, or are all these processes, just labeled like that, but they're overlapping? Like, I'm confused.
Um, so the way I think about these three terms that you've pointed out, I think they happen twice. The first one is obviously when you are in that, when you are engaging in field work, where you're constantly, asking those questions, like I said, taking down these notes, that why is it that I find something interesting? Why is it that I think this is not interesting enough? What am I projecting? What kind of theoretical frameworks am I using to, what lenses am I using? The second thing is, this exercise also happens when you write. There's a lot of resources on reflexive writing, and if you need a resource, Matt Salveson, he has written a lot, and he talks about this art of reflexive writing. So I think this happens in these two steps: while you're engaging in field work, while you're going through making sense of that, and when you start writing, that's again when you will you'll have a conversation with what you're doing, what you're writing, and then it becomes more clear what's the difference. Or at least that's how I have understood this. Dr. Anil, you might have a different take on this.
No. And and before we go to, I know Jayati was just asking the question, right? Abhishek
Yes, there
also
are
has a
two
question.
more questions on the chat box as well.
Okay, so just before we do that, I wanted to, because I didn't want to forget that train of thought about, you mentioned a couple of times, Kirti, about this research phenomena, correct?
Mhm.
So my question to you would be, and I'm sure this is on the minds of other people also who heard me talk about phenomenology and grounded theory and all of that stuff. Especially in phenomenology, people confuse the research topic with the research question with the research phenomena. So they say, oh, I have the research topic, so I know what the phenomena is. Well, I said the research topic is not your phenomena. What is it that you're after? So they say, what do you mean? What is it that I'm after? What is keeping you awake at night about this study? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand, sir. So I give them an example. So if the example of a research question would be, what is it like? And this is a phenomenological research question. I didn't mean to digress, but I bring this back in here for a reason. What is it like for an engaged employee to be working in a predominantly virtual organization? And so I tell them, if this was the research question, what is the research phenomena? So somebody will say virtuality, somebody will say something else, but they're not able to narrow down on what the research phenomena is. And in phenomenology is very important. Otherwise, you could go down a wrong rabbit hole if you don't know what you're researching. Because your interview schedule, your interview design, everything, methodology has to be around that research question or research phenomena. So in this example that I gave you, the research phenomena is employee engagement. Okay. But it doesn't jump out at somebody. So my question to you would be, in ethnography, is it important going in to have already established a research phenomena in your mind? What is it that you're researching? So that would be my question to you.
Absolutely. I think that it's important for any qualitative work. That's why I think I said, I like Carl Weick's phrase, disciplined imagination. Otherwise, what is it that you're observing? If I don't know what I'm going to, what is it that I'm interested in? So for example, my own study, right? I'm specifically interested in understanding the power dynamics in stakeholder negotiations. Then from there I start, what is it that I want to be observing? What specific meetings do I want to be a part of? What kind of, CSR projects do I want to be seeing in action? Otherwise, where is that discipline? What is it that you're observing? But having said that, it does allow you, even within that, there's a lot of opportunity to be creative. There's a lot of things that are unexplored, even with that. In fact, I stress this to my PhD students. Tell me, what is it that you want to study? And the phrasing, right? The question phrasing, how, why, what, we'll work on it. But at least in a couple of words, tell me what interests you, what is it that we are studying? And then I tell them, please, if you have chosen to do a qualitative study, whichever method you finalize, but if it's going to be an exploration, then I need you to print that out and write it and post it in front of you, so that you're constantly seeing that this is what I was studying. Because like you said, right, if the focus is engagement, but then the individual goes and starts working on virtuality, it's a different study.
Right.
Right?
Not that virtuality is not important. Virtuality as a context is very important.
Very important, yeah. But not for you right now, right? So we have
Right,
to work
exactly.
the boundaries of the research problem that we have started.
Yeah.
So if I mean, this is it's a very simple textbook, but Cresswell has this, the 5 methodologies textbook.
Yes. Yes.
And in that, he actually has a template. Now, I'm not saying that's the best template, but if you're starting out, try using that template, and that will make you very disciplined. I use that for all my PhD students, that you need to have some discipline.
Some discipline, some template. So Abhishek, who's next? Avantika?
We have Garima, Priya, and then Abhishek. So Garima and Priya have asked their questions in the chat box. So I'll just
go ahead, please.
speak the questions. Yes, sure. So Garima asks that given that this is such a dynamic environment and requires much of the researcher's involvement, I wanted to ask if there is sort of researcher method fit here, or is it skill that can be learned?
Interesting.
So I don't actually, I always say it's never a researcher method fit. It's the problem and method fit. What is it you are trying to study? Don't come and tell me I want to do an ethnography just for the sake of doing an ethnography. You tell
Oh
me
God.
what you want to understand, and then we'll decide if ethnography is the best way to find an answer. So it always starts with that idea of, some people had asked, what is a paradigm? So it does start from there. That how do I think of the world? If I think that the world resides in, in people's doings, in everyday, common sense knowledge is where I can find theory from, then yes, I'll go and, study people and let's do an ethnography. But if that's not my paradigm and if that's not my research question, then you are not going to fit a method there. And of course it is a skill. I think this is what we started with, right? That all of us are here today to learn that skill. And believe me, just today with this interaction, I think that it's been a great exercise. Like, there have been, like, I have so many questions now. And so it's definitely something that we can learn. And this is what this platform is for. And I
Right.
think, when I read that you were doing this, that's what I thought, that it's what a wonderful opportunity for people who are interested in maybe, broader qualitative work and ethnography, because now each one of us is a resource,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So I think absolutely, that, so don't think of it as a research method fit. Always think of it, your research problem phenomena comes first. What is it that you are interested in? Like sir said, what is it that's keeping you awake at night?
And I was smiling as I was talking to us because I was reminiscing about the number of times that my doctoral students have said to me, sir, after attending your phenomenology course, sir, I've fallen in love with phenomenology. Sir, I'm going to only do phenomenology. I said, well, wait a second, but what is your research question? So why do I need a research question? I love the phenomenological approach. I love IPA. I'm going to do that. Well, wait a second. You don't fall in love with somebody without knowing who that person is, right? You really have to understand each other. There's got to be a process of courtship, dating, whatever. But you don't even have a research question and you've already jumped into the research design and sir, I'm going to do 20 interviews because phenomenology IPA is saying 20 interviews. I'll do 20 interviews. I'll do it semi-structured. They give me all the vernacular, the jargon. I said, I've heard all that before. What is your research question? So why is that research question important? Because if you don't have your research question down, how can you decide what methodology is going to best address that research question? What kind of design you're going to have? So you brought up a very interesting point, Dr. Mishra, about this knowing what you're after as you go into the research, right? So Garima, thank you for raising that. And who else? Avantika, I had a question.
We have Priya.
Priya.
Priya's
Go ahead,
question
Priya.
and then Abhishek. So Priya asks, when the nature of data collected is different, example, interviews, surveys, etc., how do we bring it together?
Ah,
So if I've gotten this right, basically, through these different tools, right? So interviews, observations, we're still connecting because we're still answering that same research question. So for example, when again, I'm sorry because I'm going to contextualize it and use my own work as an example. Um, I bring all of that data, and then my first level of analysis is always creating very composite narratives, like what has happened. And this again is driven by this, so because I predominantly believe in, the process ontology, that we're thinking of, constantly becoming. So narratives are very important. So then I pool all of this data, right? Things that I've learned from interviews. And if you're interested, Anne Langley, she talks about this idea of temporal bracketing. So I start, first I'll start for chronological orders, 1990, all of this happened. And in that, I'm going to draw upon everything, right? Observations, interviews, my documents, etc. Historical data analysis is also quite useful. So for me, that's, I bring all of this and I make a composite narrative of what is happening. So for example, because I was looking at routines, one of the routines was risk management. So everything pertaining to risk management is made into one composite narrative. So I make all these different narratives, pulling in everything that I've collected through observations, conversations, my field notes, and you've mentioned surveys here. So I'm not so sure how the survey data would fit in. Like if you're talking about a mixed method approach, then it would be very different. So, we can have qualitative study, we can have quant studies, and then we have mixed methods. In
Right.
mixed method, the way you would use your qualitative and survey data is going to be different. What I have talked about is a purely qualitative approach.
Okay. Who's next? Avantika?
Abhishek.
Abhishek, go ahead.
It wonderfully, the discussion just came to my question in the very end. Dr. Mishra, so helpful listening. It's such a pleasure. And Dr. Bahl, sir, I know you asked me to not call you sir, but anyways, so informative. My question is, how do I mix quantitative studying with qualitative studying so that I can reinforce that qualitative reflection or understanding that I have? You also mentioned, Madam, that you used to maintain a column where you used to write things that were related to the topics that you wanted to study and be objective about it. So I think that also talks about maintaining a validity and not digressing from what you actually wanted to study. So how do you take care of those things when studying ethnography? Have a mixed method and keep validity also in those unstructured questions, perhaps. Hello?
Did we lose the connection with Dr. Mishra?
Yeah.
I'm so
but-
sorry. I had internet connectivity issues.
Okay,
but if
no problem. You're back. You're back. Important thing is you're back. Right.
Yeah, it was resolved quickly.
Okay.
So I didn't get the whole question, but I think if I'm do correct me if I haven't gotten it right. I think you were talking about reliability, validity, and how do you mix, quantitative data and qualitative data.
A mixed method to reinforce the qualitative findings.
Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it depends upon what is it that you're trying to do. You can start with an exploratory work where you start with qualitative data and then you want to test some of those insights. So then you have quantitative later on. Just a bit of a, so maybe I'm a little bit particular about these things. When people say reliability and validity, we need to be very clear that reliability, validity, in terms of quality of research, these are terms that are very positivist, and they're traditionally
Thank you for
used
sharing that.
for qualitative work. And then,
Thank you for
we
saying
sort of
that.
draw
Yeah.
upon them. In fact, what I'm going to do is there's a beautiful article, Tracy, Tracy, Tracy 2010, which talks about quality of qualitative research. And I urge all of you to have a look at that, because it's really important that we understand that we can't compare apples and oranges, right? So what is reliability or what is quality of quantitative research? We cannot use the same ways to assess the quality of a qualitative work. These are two different things. So when you say reliability, validity, it does confuse me a little bit, because I'm not sure what is it that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because in qualitative, um, we've borrowed these and very positivist. So a lot of qualitative researchers, we have different ways in which we talk about the quality of our work. For example, thick description, the trustworthiness
Yes.
of the data,
Big
making
data,
sure
right.
that you're coding, for
Mhm.
example, the way that you're presenting your evidence. All of these are criteria for a good qualitative work. And reliability, validity, all of those, not so important, or they just don't apply to the work that we're doing, because it's very positivist. If you're, so for example, Yin does talk about validity, reliability when he's speaking of case studies. And again, you'll find that people have been a bit critical of that why do we keep holding on to these traditional ways of evaluating qualitative research? It's a different phenomenon altogether.
It's
I
a
mean,
totally different. Yeah.
yeah, you could add on, but that's just my opinion, that it doesn't apply here.
Right.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Depends
For
on the
instance. Yeah, and to your point, just to piggyback on your thought, like for instance, in phenomenology, we do not attempt to define, describe, validate, refute, taxonomize, or hypothesize. And people say, well, where is the theory? Sir, but what theory am I working with? What's my theoretical framework? Well, the theoretical framework is always beneath the surface. It's always underlying that. But if your entire approach is to go with that theoretical, because it's a pre-theoretical, pre-reflective exercise. So you have to be able to, not that you shun theory totally, not that you push it out of consciousness. You're always going to have that at the back of your mind. But while you're doing the research, you're allowing the phenomena to speak to yourself, speak to you in its most primordial and originary forms. So if you put a theoretical spin on it, right, you've already taken away from that whole endeavor. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. Avantika, who else has a question?
We have Ajit first,
Ajit.
and then we have, Arunima.
Aruma. And after them, I think Kirti, what we can do is we can go into your presentation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I will stop my, what? Is that fine?
Yeah, works.
Okay, okay, works for you. Okay, great. All right.
So
So
I was,
go ahead.
So Dr. Anil and Dr. Mishra, I was just
Go ahead. We
a
lost your
larger
audio.
point to make.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, which is really around the fact that both of these, at least in the limited ways that I understand it, tend to be a lot more respectful and inclusive of human beings. You know, because they're not presupposing frameworks. Largely, they're kind of really participative. They're allowing you to be in your own space. Phenomenology also allows things to emerge in the moment. And, you know, as you just said, it doesn't presuppose anything. And therefore, in some ways, you know, they tend to be a lot more inclusive of the people that are being studied, rather than, you know, boxing them into predefined notional grids or whatever. And
Yeah.
by that nature itself, I think it tends to be a lot more inclusive, which I think as a philosophy might work a lot better in these times when we're seeing you know, greater polarization in the world, and people taking stronger stances and things getting divided a lot more. As research approaches probably will work much better, because people tend to open up possibly a lot more to these kinds of inquiries, or these means of approaching them and including them in a dialogue process. I mean, just a
That's
hypothesis.
Right. Who is next?
We have Arunima. She asks, I wanted your insights on how we can imagine ethnography in the near future, post-COVID scene. I mean, the tools we will be using and how we can ensure validity and reliability for the same.
Great. So Kirti, if you can address both Ajit's question and this one.
I have to apologize. I didn't really hear Ajit's question because I'm still having some
Some internet connectivity issue.
Yeah, I'm just turn off my video so that sometimes it does help improve.
Yes, the bandwidth. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Okay.
So if you could just summarize, maybe what was it? I'm extremely sorry, Ajit.
No, go ahead. Ajit, go ahead, please.
Sure. No, it was just more of an observation, and maybe you know, some comments from you, Dr. Mishra and Dr. Anil. Really around the fact that because ethnography and phenomenology both allow for the participant to really be who they are, and phenomenology also kind of doesn't presuppose anything. It lets things emerge in the moment, you know, allows itself for subjective experiences. Both of these therefore are inherently a lot more inclusive, is what my, you know, kind of really conjecture is. They tend to make people a lot more feel a lot more included, rather than being boxed and being kind of really straitjacketed into you know, scales and predefined you know, ways of answering. And therefore in these times it just seems like you know, this is a lot more relevant, you know, given the nature of how things are around the world and how people are feeling in general, you know, which is divided, polarized, etc. I mean, so
I couldn't agree more. What do you think, Kirti?
Absolutely. You know, the insights that we generate, and you know, getting to know people, the variations, the diversity that we see, these methods do allow us to capture that more. You know, the the fact that, these thick descriptions, there's so much knowledge in that, and it's more inclusive. And I think, traditionally, that's why when we look at, when we go back to evaluation studies around developmental evaluations, we see that a lot of people drawing on action research. And the idea being, drawing more on methods such as ethnography and phenomenology to understand and evaluate developmental interventions. So maybe, that was the reason, that they're more inclusive, more participatory, more conversational, and it's giving you thick data, thick descriptions.
Thick. So you say, to Kirti, you've repeated this expression thick, which if you would be so kind as to tell us a little bit more, because I think this comes up in our conversations a lot. What is thick data?
So thick data is, it's very descriptive data, like what is going, what is it that you are, you're studying, you're observing, and the what, who, why, when, everything, it includes what's happening. So, in terms of, for example, marketing, right? Like if you use a phone, it's all about, why did you buy an iPhone? What is it that you do? How much time are you spending on a particular app? Um, what is it that use that particular app for, versus what somebody else is going to be doing? So it's really getting into, it's more humanistic, more based on the individual and understanding, rather than collecting a lot of data. It's zoning in and finding out, just limiting, it's limiting the number, but it's actually giving you an overall experience of what is happening. um so that's thick data for me, that
Okay, actually,
very
and
much.
yeah,
Yeah,
and as
sorry.
an example, for instance, when we are doing phenomenology and doing the discursive, evocative descriptions, and especially in IPA, it's pathos laden. We've all heard the expression ethos, pathos, logos. Okay, ethos is the ethics of a problem. The pathos is the deep emotions, and the logos is the logic behind it. So, for instance, in IPA, when we refer to thick data, we are talking about emotionally charged, emotionally laden data. We just don't hover on the surface. For instance, if you ask somebody, what is it like for an unwed mother to raise a child in a single parent household? We are going for rich, evocative, emotional descriptions. We are not just staying on the surface. So thick can mean different things in qualitative, but definitely very elaborate data. So not just staying on the surface. So thanks for clarifying that, Kirti. So at this point, I think I should stop my share so Kirti can offer
Dr.
her
Anil, we
own.
have another question from Priya.
Okay, go ahead, Priya, please.
Okay, so I'll just repeat her question. She asks, is it safe to say that in qualitative research, we can drop hypothesis testing as we are accepting raw and real information as it is, or it provides an outline to our research questions as we are not very much keen on outcome or yes or no answer as we get in quantitative researches?
Go ahead.
Dr. Kirti, were you able to hear the question?
So if you're asking us, because I thought that it was it was more of a yes or no. So yeah, there's no hypothesis testing. The logic of hypothesis testing doesn't apply to ethnography or even phenomenology for that matter. So there's no hypothesis testing that we are engaging in. Is that what you were after? Because I'm not sure what the actual question was.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, if you could,
Sure.
because I'm not sure what is it that you want. What is the question here? I thought it was a long
Not a
statement.
problem. I'll repeat it again. She asks, is it safe to say that in qualitative research, we can drop hypothesis testing as we are accepting raw and real information as it is, or it provides an outline to our research questions as we are not very much keen on outcome or yes or no answer as we get in quantitative researches?
Yeah,
So did
absolutely.
she say drop hypothesis
Yes,
testing,
yes.
or draw? Okay, was it drop? Okay. Oh,
Drop.
okay, good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're right. Like I said, so what you have is, yeah, we're not testing hypothesis. We're not testing theory, right? In qualitative, we are developing theory.
Okay.
So very different ways of understanding.
Yes.
This also.
We are yet to answer Arunima's question as well. Actually, we forgot that
Really
between the
quick, because
conversation.
Dr. Kirti has to do her own presentation on this, on her
Sure, sure,
study.
sure. I'll ask her
So,
question quickly.
so
So she
quickly.
wanted to ask, I wanted your insights on how we can imagine ethnography in the near future, post-COVID scene. I mean, the tools we will be using and how we can ensure validity and reliability for the same.
I think the tools will remain the same, to be very honest. My own project, we've stopped it because the observations are not possible. But that it just means, right, you have to be creative. Like I said, blessing in disguise. It just means that, we've been given access to a lot of documents, and we start with that. So that's what has changed in the post COVID world. I mean, of course, if this continues, then as researchers, we'll also have to take certain calls on the safety. That's primarily one reason. So my field work is to be in Udaipur, and technically things are open in Udaipur. But in terms of safety, I've decided that, I'll do the secondary data analysis first, till it becomes absolutely safe for me to visit communities and stay there and spend time there. And again, I said, with reliability and validity, um, it I don't know how does the COVID scenario impact it. It doesn't, right? I mean, we're still going to be doing our research with a lot of trustworthiness, with thick descriptions, making sure that our, the coding, the analysis, and everything else, follows a structure, and it's rigorous. So COVID will not. I don't think it's having any impact on that.
Okay, so with
Okay,
that, I
thank
think we
you.
could go ahead with your presentation.
Right.
Kirti?
Yeah, so I'm not going to take a lot of time because I think a lot of what I have here we've already talked about, which is always fantastic. But when I was starting with ethnography, it was a challenge. It was quite overwhelming. My PhD student has heard stories of me crying as well. And in fact, very recently, she undertook a qualitative project, and she was also overwhelmed. And I told her that it's a good sign. If you're not sleeping, because you're thinking, you're dreaming of your data, and if you feel you're overwhelmed, it's a good sign, then you're doing something right. In fact, if you were not overwhelmed, then I would be questioning what is it that you're doing. Your interviews, there's something not right there. So with that in mind, I thought that I'll discuss reflections. These are not these are things that have helped me. There are certain challenges that I faced, and I like to share how I sort of overcame them. Feel free to use them, modify them, adapt them, and if it works for you. So just to give you an overview, what this is derived from my PhD work. And to give you a bit of a context, like I said, the research problem or the aim determines the method, not the other way around. So what I wanted to actually understand is, climate change responses, they happen at the level of the organization, but how is it that people within the organizations, right, their actions, their sayings, their doings, how does it lead to development of organizational change responses? For those of you who are a bit maybe theoretically inclined, this is drawing from strategy as practice, and process ontology is driving this sort of a research aim. And within that, there were specific things, and the reason I've highlighted those three questions is because I want to make it very clear, these questions were not set in stone on day one, right? The way we write it, yes, we write it as if they were set in stone on day one, but that's not the case with qualitative. These have been refined, these have been worked on as more data has been collected and it has been analyzed. So but yes, the overall research aim has remained constant. The other three specific questions, we have worked on them. So please don't beat yourself up if you think that, okay, I don't have my research questions set up, because they will change depending upon your field work. So the idea was looking at routines, what are routine connections, and how do actors, that is people working in organizations, they create routines, they maintain routines, and they modify routines. And all of this in connection with climate change responses. So in terms of design, it was an ethnographic study, Australian energy company, and there were two reasons for doing this. First of all, again, in the broader theoretical framework of strategy as practice, as well as process ontology, ethnography has been recommended as the choice of method, because you're trying to understand individual actions, how they're connected to each other. So it involves, or rather, it needs a very deep immersion with the objects of your study. Also, it is really important to ensure that the case that you take, or the company that I took, it was actually responding to climate change. So because it's an energy company, it was mandatory according to the Australian law. Now, like I said, I'm interested in, I like to study how things evolve, how routines are changed, modified. So because it's a how question, so I'm studying development, so hence it had to be a longitudinal study. So the time period was 2008 to 2016. Again, very purposely sampled time period. 2008 was the year when this company was listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. And also 2008 was the year when the Australian government ratified the Kyoto Protocol, making it mandatory that companies have to report their emissions. So this is driven by the theory and what I want to study. Instruments, document analysis. So 2008, I wasn't actually around in Australia. I don't think I knew what climate change impact and Kyoto meant in 2008. So documents, historical data analysis was a very useful tool for me. Non-participant observation. So I was there, but I wasn't working with them. I wasn't helping them. I wasn't going to tell them that, you have said this in the meeting and you should have said this. And I also had interviews. I had some interviews before my observations, and then there were also interviews post observations where I learned something. I saw something and I was like, I need to talk to you about this. Also, I did this across all levels in the organization, from the board of governors to people who are working in the mines. So 52 interviews, and I spent 24 days in the company. And also I attended meetings that were being held. So, there was a board committee responsible for climate change, and every time they had a meeting, I was there. Now, a little bit of a tidbit over here, a tip. Executive assistants are extremely, extremely helpful. Secretaries, executive assistants, because they will know who is where and who has a meeting with whom. So instead of directly talking to the CEO, I would just talk to the executive assistant, and I would know what his timetable was for the entire week, what his plan was, where was he going to be, and I could then plan accordingly. So find such people in your field. It could be community gatekeepers, it could be in organizations, it really could be secretaries, admin people. They will be really, really a useful source for you. I wouldn't go too much into data analysis because we're focusing on the method right now. Now, this is, I found this to be very, very useful for me. This is a 2006 article, and it talked about the overall ethnographic process. And I found that it worked really well with my own study. So the first step is that of getting in. Very, very important. So this is all the pre-planning.
Dr. Kirti, I'm sorry to cut you off, but is it me or your presentation is stuck on just one slide?
I have moved it.
Are everybody able to see the next slide?
No, even my thing is stuck on that first slide itself, the research design.
Right, I think that's the case with everybody. Could you just reshare your slide again?
Right, let me just stop and share screen. Sorry about that. Is it?
Yes,
there you go.
now it's visible. Perfect.
Sorry.
There you go. There you go.
That's what I was talking about. So I've kind of already discussed this, right? The gaining access, the negotiation process. It's really important to be truthful. I think Siddhant would agree with community. It is a different kind of challenges. When I go, Siddhant, you were talking about, being from a different country altogether. But even within India, within India, I've had that. So Rajasthan, I'm working with a lot of tribal communities, and I am a Mishra from north of India. So the caste barriers are very much there for me also to navigate. And I actually empathize with you as well, because again, there's no template, there's no answer. And this is where I rely on my community partners to guide me through it. What is appropriate for me to say. Just to share an example, a lot of these people will not sit down because if I'm standing, and and I find it absolutely it just doesn't work with me. Like, why is it that they won't sit down? And I keep, in the first meetings I would just be like, no, you sit, you sit. And then later I learned that I was actually, I can be construed as being very rude by not sitting down. Or like they would bring water for me, which is not from the water that they are drinking, right? It's a nicely packaged Bisleri bottle for me, and in refusing it, right, because my immediate action was, forget all this caste system, why, I'll drink the same water. But then I was informed that this would be construed as me being rude. So I think, you learn as you go. Just be open to learning and have those, so for me, the NGO partners are really, really good. They really help me navigate these challenges. Getting on, like I said, preparations, I'll discuss a couple of templates later on. Getting out is also very important. I think people forget. Make sure that if you have promised that you're going to make a presentation to the community or to the NGO or to the organization, please do that. If you have told them that, we have this idea of member checking, that I'm going to send you some transcripts to review, please do that. It's nice to say a thank you, and that finally we have done this. Do ask them, would you like me to share some insights of, from what I have learned? It's always, round it off as well. Do let me know if it moves to the next slide. I hope it does. So taking field notes, really important. Yeah. So this is what I do. First of all, I write down, because this is happening while you're in the field, right? You're observing a meeting, let's say. So jottings are basically, I'll write down that, and then I'll revisit them later. So for example, if the topic of the meeting was that we need to change a particular NGO, or, we are going to move from carbon disclosure project to GRI guidelines. So those are some of the jottings that I'll have. Description would be, who initiated the meeting, who initiated the conversation. What is, how are other people talking to this person? Where is this person sitting? What happens, right, when he makes this point? How are the other people reacting to it? Then I'll start, looking at analysis. Is there some power structure here? Is this about some discourse? What kind of socio-materiality things can I learn from there? And then finally, reflection, like, why is it that I think so? What have I learned on a personal level as well? Why am I reacting to it this way? Why do I think this is interesting, and things like that? So basically what I think of it is that, I'm collecting two kinds of information. The first is my descriptive information, who is doing what. And again, I do apologize because I'm talking specifically from my work. So it's more about organizational stuff. And you will see here, I've clearly written down, research question is always going to be the guiding framework when you are reflecting, right? So please remember disciplined imagination. Now, so this is something that I actually, one of my colleagues shared with me. Now, this comes from design thinking, but I actually find it to be very useful in ethnography. What is it that somebody's saying? What is it that they're doing? How do they feel? Right? When somebody comes up with a new idea at a meeting, how do the others respond emotionally? And what are they thinking? For the thinking part, you can't always observe. This is where the questions, the interview comes in hand. So this is a tool, empathy map. It's not something I've created, but I found it really, really useful. So people who are doing ethnography, you might want to have a look at it. It's very simple, right? But it helps with data analysis a lot. And finally, this is something that I have developed on my own. You can see I have, so you can modify this template based on your research question. I usually take a lot of A4 sheets, I bind them, and I make this, rows into tables and columns. It's up to you how you would like to do it. Some people use Post-it notes as well. I also do color coding. And I also, have short forms for people. So, for example, if it's a sustainability meeting, I'll just do, SM. So I have these shorthands as well, because like I said, observations can be so overwhelming. So I've written some examples here. Again, these might not apply to what you are doing. So in my case, for example, language, formal versus informal. So when an NGO partner comes in and you have the community leader and you have, a corporate partner, what is the language there? Is everybody addressing them as sir, aap? Is the community elder being addressed as aap? Because that shows to me the power dynamic. So I pay attention to that. Who is sitting where, right? So if the community leader walks in, and does everybody stand up? And do they actually wait for everybody else to sit down and then if a community leader, for example, is late, how do the others react? Like, do they make a big fuss about it or they just let it go? It also shows the power dynamics. So those are the things that, and this is all pre-planning. So I try and, put all of these things as much as I can in my template beforehand. In my case, I'm also interested in the temporality, how many times does a meeting happen? Is it an activity which is happening regularly? What kind of, so a great example of this is, answering emails. So many a times not answering an email is also a purposeful action that I actually want to delay it. So those kind of delaying tactics also show me, the power imbalances or how people are negotiating in a meeting. So I make a note of that. Space where the meeting is happening is also important. So is the company saying that, come to our office? And I am not kidding here. This is an example from my own fieldwork. The energy company that I was talking about, they used to have their meetings with the NGO partners in a designated meeting room. And the way it was structured, it was always that the members of the organization would always be sitting at a level higher than that of the NGO partners. And this was deliberately done. So we are, we are the ones, even though this looks, on paper, we have a memorandum of understanding that equal stakeholders and, deliberative democracy and whatnot. But in terms of using the physical space, the corporation was making it very clear that we are the ones who have power here. We are going to dictate things here. So the space is really important for my work as well. And then of course the why, like why is it that people are engaging in the things that they do. So like I said, interviews will happen beforehand and after as well, a lot of conversations. So one of the reasons that I actually end up a bit early for my interviews and observations is actually to have conversations. You're there a bit early, you start talking to somebody and it all helps and it becomes a part of your field work. So it shows dedication, and it's also a tactic employed by me to understand and to gather more information. So that's actually what I had. Just to sort of wrap it up, having been there, I can tell you that it's overwhelming. Qualitative data is, and if you don't feel overwhelmed, then you're probably not doing it right. But at the same time, there are ways in which we can make sense of data. One thing that we haven't talked about right now is the iterative nature of any qualitative work, be it phenomenology, be it ethnography or grounded theory as well. So please understand that data collection, your reading of literature and your analysis are happening at the same time, right? So don't be like, okay, I have finished my interviews, I have finished my, so don't, when you're planning, it's not going to be like, yes, I'm going to finish my 52 interviews and then I will start with analysis. If you recall in my template, I actually had my analysis column as well. So these things are happening simultaneously. These templates really help. I have friends who who use post-it notes. I have friends who use color coding, like I also do color coding, and we just using shorthand. But this pre-planning is very, very useful. I'm speaking from experience. It makes the process really enjoyable because you're not constantly thinking, I have not written this down, I've not done this. And at the same time, it makes your analysis very, very structured. People were talking about reliability and validity. In fact, ensuring, these templates, this actually helps you show that how I'm using empirical evidence to connect to my theory or to develop more frameworks. So it really helps in improving the quality of your work. Another thing that people have started doing is, and that depends upon whether you have the permission or not, you can also record meetings. I think most of us are familiar with recording interviews. You can take consent from the participant, but even for meetings and for taking observations, if it's if you can get consent, then these can be recorded, and then you just analyze them and go through them as you would go through the interview data. So that's actually what I had in mind. I just wanted to share with you some tools and techniques, and you're free to use them. You're free to come up with yours. But
That's
just
great.
remember.
So one of the questions that came up from Javed was,
Yeah,
is it okay to share your my PowerPoint is okay. I always willing. Can we share your PowerPoint with the group?
Absolutely, not an issue at all. In fact,
Okay.
if you adapt the template, you add things onto it, then do let me know also.
That's good. Yeah,
Work on this
that's excellent.
together.
So that's excellent. So if you can just exit your PowerPoint, I'll get into mine just for a second here. Let's see. Okay, let's see how I can get to mine. All right.
Yeah, I've stopped sharing. So
You stop sharing? Okay, so I think I have to get into share my screen. Okay, so I think I should get into here, share. Okay, all right. So I'm back here. So now I'm always of the philosophy that rather than rush through everything, okay, it's important to stay centered on what we've been discussing the most about. Okay, so what I would like to do is, rather than jump into ethnomethodology, which is going to take a whole block of time, I'd like to stay on Dr. Kirti Mishra's presentation and the discourse, and open this out for you all to ask your questions of Dr. Kirti Mishra. And I'll share this PowerPoint to you at some point, maybe down in the near future. We will do a whole blown out presentation on ethnomethodology. It's a very involved process. You heard about conversation analysis. It's used very, very much in linguistics, and it's a part of sociology. It brings in Alfred Schutz's social phenomenology into the picture. So it's a very complex type of approach. So I'd rather spend a whole segment on that, doing that at some future point in time. So at this time, I'd like to open this floor to to all of you, and I'd like to request Dr. Kirti Mishra, as usual, to field
Dr.
any
Anil?
questions that you might have. Go ahead.
Dr. Anil, Mitakshara maybe has raised her hand, so can she just
Oh,
ask a
Mitakshara,
question?
I didn't know she was here. Okay, she's been here hiding silently. Mitakshara, what do you have on your mind? Go ahead.
So actually, I had a question to ma'am, like with regard to her
Yes.
research.
Mhm.
Ma'am, I had to ask two questions. First is, what kind of ethical dilemmas did you face while conducting this research? And the second was about getting out. So I believe it needs to be a whole process of getting out, since you have been immersed in the setting for so long. I guess we would have to take a few days or even like a few weeks in hand before getting out. So I wanted to know the process of it, your experience, sorry.
right. So is this? So I'm going to talk about the first, my PhD study first. In terms of ethical dilemma, climate change is a very, very heated political topic, and I mean it's a very heated political topic across the world, but more so in Australia. It's a lot of prime ministers have lost their jobs because of climate change, um, and then working in one of the largest coal mining companies. The dilemma was always, and I'll be honest, right? So I'm also at the time of the research, I was actually also their customer, and I never realized, but the seniors had actually given me their visiting cards, which were nothing but coupons for getting rebate on my electricity bill. That's something that I learned later on. My participants had also, the company had also offered that, because I was based in Melbourne and the head office was in Sydney, that we will fly you and we'll be happy to pay for your stay. So when it comes to ethical dilemmas, again, I think people who have been in this field longer, so our supervisors, is what I did. I immediately went to discuss this with my supervisors, my colleagues, and they, of course, they couldn't support my research at all, because as a researcher, I'm reporting, I'm reporting from a distance. I cannot be involved. I cannot be seen as, supporting them as well. I also had to be very clear from the beginning that I'm not going to be talking about what is the right climate change response, because that's not what the topic of the work is. I'm just trying to explain how things, individual actions within the organization, they lead to certain sort of a response at the organizational level. The context is that of climate change, but I'm not going to be telling whether you are doing a great job. I'm not going to be sharing this with others and also saying that you are doing a fantastic job and you're a great green company. None of that will happen. Before I started with my data collection, I actually had meetings with the entire board of directors and senior management, explaining to them what my work was and what would be the outcome. So this is connected to you signing off also. They had actually requested that they wanted a bit of a, they wanted a seminar once my data collection was over. And individual teams had wanted to have, reflective conversations once my study was over. So after I finished my thesis and I submitted, I wrote to all of them and I did that. And I think it's the fact that they are still very, all of them are connected to me and I can still ring them up and mail them and ask them about information is a testament to that closing of that loop. Um, don't make any promises. Don't say that you're going to get this done, especially in organization studies. Please don't go and offer them that we're going to fix this problem. If I would rather say that even if you think you can fix that problem, don't just undersell yourself, because there's setting wrong expectations can be really, really detrimental. um, a lot of times in qualitative work, I have seen, there is a requirement that we need to, once we start in-depth analysis, we need to go back to the field as well. So if you set wrong expectations and you don't close that loop properly, then it can come to haunt you. I had also, given this option to my participants that if you would like to read the finished copy of the thesis, this was part of my ethics statement, then it would be made available to you. And a few of them had. So I ensured that once my thesis had been written and marked, I sent them a copy of the thesis. Some individuals had also requested for a transcript of their interview. So I ensured again that it was sent to them on a timely manner. So those were some of the things that I had to do to close that loop.
Right. Thanks, Kirti. And Avantika, if you could also just cut and paste the entire chat into
Sure,
a
I'll
separate
do
document.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure,
you've already
sure.
done that?
No, I'll do that. But before
Yeah.
that, we have Priya's question. So in
Okay,
the
sure.
chat box, so I'll just
Yeah.
repeat her question.
Yeah,
She
yeah, yeah.
asks, could you please elaborate on what includes in pre-research and designing templates and how to go about it?
Wow, nice.
Yeah, so very basic stuff again comes from your research question. In terms of observation, what is it that you're observing? Why is it you're observing? What time will you be observing? What behaviors are important for you? Like I said, is it important how people are dressed? You're maybe doing a culture study, so you want to look at that. What is in the room, for example, if you're looking at artifacts, that might be important. So based on your research question and your reading of the literature, the what, why, how, all of this is going to be a part of your template. Make sure that you've thought it through. Try to visualize the setting and how it would be important. Like I said, I'm looking at negotiations, so power imbalances. Therefore, it's really important for me that who is sitting where. If it's not important for you, then you don't need to look into it. If you're looking at the kind of language people are using, then that needs to be a part of your template. So I'm like I said, I'll share my template, and I think you would have to customize it, driving from your own research question.
That's excellent. Anybody else has any questions? I just want to be mindful about the time boundary. It's 11:30 for me in the morning, but it's probably 10 now. What time is it for you? 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock at night, right? So I don't want to pull this more than we have to. But if you have a couple of quick questions, I'm sure Kirti wouldn't mind staying a couple of minutes longer and answer them. Otherwise, we can always have these questions fielded via email. Okay. But here
I've
she
already
is,
shared
and
my email. Yeah, so please feel free to drop in a message.
great, great. So if nobody has any questions, we can wind this up for today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Kirti Mishra for spending time with us. She has been a very, very valuable resource. And I've certainly learned a lot from her discourse here and our conversation here. And so thank you, Kirti, for taking time out of your schedule to do this. I know you could have other things to do on a Saturday evening, you know. I don't know how much more you can do in a COVID situation, but we all have things to do. So thank you for devoting that much time and energy to us. And also thank you, Avantika, for keeping us on track and for moderating the session. And of course, it goes without saying, I want to thank all of you that have participated and for your brilliant questions and insights and observations. And if we've not had a chance to address some of your questions, we can certainly do that via email. And I'm sure Dr. Mishra will be more than happy to answer those questions for you. So with that, I would like to end the session. All of you, please be safe. And this is certainly by no means the end. It's the beginning of an understanding. It's a very complex, very vast methodology, approach, whatever, in qualitative research. So let's continue the journey. And I'd be happy to share both the PowerPoints. Avantika will be able to send them to you. And also the other resources that I have here, I'll be happy to share those also with you. They're on the internet, they were public, so I can share them with you. All right. So again, I appreciate your time and the energy. And with that, I'll just say goodbye. All right. Thanks. We'll do a recording of the session and we will post the recording on YouTube and create a link and share that link with everybody also. All right. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.